It's a pressured animal. You have to figure out what that animal is doing to get away from that hunting pressure. And I usually get in places that he thinks he's safe, you know, but Jody's up in that tree about 30, 40 feet up waiting to ambush him, you know, coming into his bed, and he's just in a bind, you know. I sat on the rail of my tree and I faced the tree. So I was behind the trunk of the cypress tree. And I was ready with my rifle. I heard him coming in the water, and he hit a rub line that I had scouted, I had found, and he got on that rub line. It was about 9:30 in the morning. You know, I guess he was late chasing does or whatever, and he was coming into that swamp. He was going to his bed, which I was probably 30 yards from. And this animal was coming, and I just knew it was going to be a good buck. You know, so I was ready. I had my rifle ready, and I was waiting. And
Can you give us, I want to get a lot more of your background specifically of hunting these swamps and also crawfishing down here as well.
Well, let me start off by saying my dad, he was born and raised in the Atchafalaya Basin. He actually lived on a houseboat in the Atchafalaya Basin way back when. If he'd be 100 years old today if he'd still be alive. He died at 84 years old. But they had to survive by fishing for finfish. You know, later on in years, they started catching crawfish when crawfish were actually marketable. You could make money with. But he hunted ducks. He hunted squirrels. You know, deer, he told me back then, to see a deer was like seeing a ghost, because the basin was mainly an aquatic area. You know, before the Corps did all of its dredging and everything and piled up the high dredge ball banks, you didn't really have the terrestrial habitat that would accommodate deer like you do now. But after years, we started having a lot of deer. But my dad basically survived and raised 8 kids fishing, commercially fishing for finfish, feeding his family fish, catching crawfish, feeding his family crawfish, making a living, selling them, and hunting. You know, we always ate wild game that came out of the Atchafalaya Basin, whether it be squirrel, rabbit, ducks, deer. You know, that's what we ate growing up, you know. And one time we went on a field trip at school, and my mom had pot roasted me a teal duck, you know, and stuffed it with garlic and cooked it real tender to where the breast was almost busting open. It was so tender. And I was kind of ashamed to, you know, all the other kids had sandwiches and stuff, and I was kind of ashamed to break out that container with, you know, the mentality of a young kid. You know, I wasn't even a teenager yet. And when I opened up that container with that teal duck, man, everybody wanted to trade me their bologna sandwich for my teal duck. And I said, man, my mom got up early this morning and pot roasted that duck for me to bring that with me for my lunch. You know what I mean? So you can about imagine growing up following a swamper, a wilderness man who grew up living on a floating house in the Atchafalaya Basin. I learned a lot. You know what I mean? I came across a lot of wildlife, and I learned how to get some to eat and to feed my family, and also make a living from crawfishing or whatever. You know, I fish catfish already when I was younger, but it's hard to make a living fishing catfish now. But crawfish is it's like a delicacy to the world. You know what I mean? You can still make a pretty good living catching crawfish. But yeah, I learned so much from him, and then I incorporated my own tactics, you know, from seeing the opportunities that was out there, and I learned a lot of things on my own, trial and error, you know, experimenting. I was able to also read articles and stuff of hunting in other regions of the country, and I kind of incorporated that in basin hunting. Basin hunting, what I grew up hunting is a pressured animal. You know, he's trying to survive, he's trying to get away from hunting pressure. And I had to figure out where to get on these nice bucks. Because, I mean, every buck I have is considered a trophy for the basin that I have mounted. Whether it be a skull mount or a shoulder mount, it's considered a trophy for the basin. You know, you kill a 115, 120-inch buck in the basin, you did something pretty good. You know, it's a pressured animal. You have to figure out what that animal is doing to get away from that hunting pressure. And I usually get in places that he thinks he's safe, you know, but Jody's up in that tree about 30, 40 feet up waiting to ambush him, you know, coming into his bed, and he's just in a bind, you know.
Now, at what age did you start deer hunting? Is it something you did immediately as a kid? Because I knew you grew up in the woods.
I killed my first deer at 7 years old. And my brother, we hunted dogs at that time. Everybody hunted dogs. There was no such thing as steel hunting, hunting sign, hunting rubs, hunting scrapes, you know, hunting tracks, hunting deer droppings, hunting feed, potential feed. We stretched a line of men through the woods, and 3 or 4 or 5 guys would take the deer dogs, and they turn them loose in the briar thicket or in the water and try to jump the deer, and the dogs would take off running the deer and run them through the line of men. And, you know, and we just mow the deer down. You know, sometimes we'd get on them real good. Sometimes we wouldn't kill them that much. And people still hunt that way. But later on, I killed a few deer after that at a very young age. You know, I was always following either my brother around or my dad around in the swamps. And later on, we got away from hunting dogs. I was tired of chasing these deer and pressuring these deer and everything, and I started trying to hunt them where they try to get away from the pressure, and I started becoming pretty successful, killing some good deer.
And one thing I want to kind of go back to, specifically with your dad being a commercial fisherman, and you kind of growing up that household and everything else, and kind of being entered into the woods and doing all kinds of hunting and fishing as a young kid, and still today. What was it like following your dad around? Like, did you ever like go crawfishing with him, catfishing with him, or anything like that, specifically as a young kid? And what kind of woodsmanship skills did you learn spending time with your dad?
Yeah, exactly. You know, when I talk to people about how I grew up and what I learned, you know, when an animal's born or anything, you know, they follow the mother animal or the father animal around, and they pick up what they're supposed to do to survive. You know what I'm saying? I compare that to me following my dad around. You know what I mean? My old man, he went to the 7th grade. You know, he wasn't an extremely educated man, but he was very intelligent, you know, as far as being a woodsman and having good common sense and good knowledge, and an unbelievable man. But he wasn't really one to teach you and tell you, this is how you do this, Jody. This is why you do this. You watch what he did and you learn from it. You follow what I'm saying? So I learned how to catch fish, you know, how to catch crawfish, where to do it, what was the best, you know, situations for it. Learn how to hunt. You know, he'd always raise squirrel dogs. We'd hunt squirrels with squirrel dogs. And as a kid, you know, I would follow him around. I had my gun. Sometimes I'd shoot. Sometimes he'd shoot, you know. But one of us had to pull the vine. The dog would be barking and that squirrel would be hidden up in that tree, and it's a real viney, bushy tree. And he said, Jody, you see that vine on that tree? He said, go pull that vine. So I was always the vine puller. I'd grab that vine, I'd pull on that vine, and that squirrel would take off running, and he'd shoot it, man. When that squirrel would hit the ground, the dogs would grab it, and, you know. And then the dogs were really smart. You'd shoot a squirrel, and it's like they didn't want to leave the tree. They kept barking, kept looking up at that squirrel. I said, Dad, why they still barking? He said, there's another squirrel in that tree. So sometimes it was in the next tree, you know, and he said, go pull that vine in that tree. Boy, sure enough, there was another squirrel. That dog wasn't stupid. He knew there was more than one squirrel right there. So I grew up doing all of that with him, and he wasn't a big deer hunter as far as hunting signs, but crawfishing with him in the basin, that's how I first started learning what animals would do to get away from hunting pressure. You know, we'd be in the boat crawfishing, and there would be these uprooted trees, and it would make a hill protruding out of 2-3 feet of water, and it was a perfect spot for an animal, a deer or whatever, to go and lay up on that hill and stay dry and stay out of the water, whether it was cold or just to get out of that water. And sometimes we'd get right on them 15 or 20 yards, and that deer would bail off of that hill, that uprooted hill of that tree. And I said, man, Dad, what that deer's doing back here as a kid? You know, he said, he's trying to get away, he's trying to survive, trying to get away from the hunting pressure. And I said, yeah, you know, and it kind of registered. And as I grew up in those areas, and, you know, you hunting these deer, and you're figuring out they're going in that swamp. They're going to get away from the pressure. And I started scouting, and I started getting in there before daylight early in the morning, and I was listening to the noise and, all of these hunters coming into the area. And all of a sudden I start hearing these deer coming in the water. You know what I mean? And, you know, the basin is full of like breaks of cypress trees. You can look at a break of cypress trees over there, and you could tell that animal you hearing going through that water. Say, if I'd be in that group of cypress trees over there, I could see that animal. So a lot of times it was a learning experience for me. It was a hunt, get up early in the morning, go set up, and I wouldn't kill, but I would learn. I said, that animal's passing over there. And sure enough, I'd go set up, and the next morning he was pressured again. Sure enough, there he'd come, you know, and I was waiting for him. He had no clue. He thought he was getting to a safe haven. And, you know, I was ready to ambush him when he was coming into trying to get away from the pressure, you know. So I learned that, and I incorporated it into my hunting.
Now, also, while we're talking about, you know, kind of focusing more on the deer hunting here, how long did it take you to figure out how those bucks were, specifically some of the bucks were using that pressure or affected by that pressure to kind of back up into these swamps? I mean, were you pretty young, or did it take you until you're like maybe your 20s or 30s before it really started clicking? Well,
actually, when I kind of really got bitten by the bug of trying to hunt a good dominant deer was when I killed this buck over here to my right. I killed that buck at 21 years old, and we had come back from a dog hunt. And my mom always had a good dinner cooked at the camp. She was an unbelievable cook. And the guys wouldn't stay in the woods long. When we started still hunting, none of them would stay on stand long. They were too anxious to come back to the camp and eat Loretta's cooking. You know what I mean? But anyway, we had got back to the camp, and she had made a big spaghetti lunch, and everybody was eating. I think I had grabbed a bite to eat, and I said, look, I told my mom, I'm going across the river on the island. I said, I'm going to try to kill a big buck. It was peak rut, but January 13th. I said, I'm going to try to kill a buck. And I said, if I don't kill one, I won't be back before dark. She said, okay. I was 21 years old. And I left the camp and I went, and I knew the area right there had good deer because you see the sign of them. And I sat down on the ground by a stump, and I wasn't sitting long. And I heard kind of like a grunting and some noise, and I looked, and a doe was coming. So I stood up and I got ready. I said, for a doe to be coming, a buck's probably going to be behind her. So she was coming through the woods about 35 yards, and I was watching her. I looked, sure enough, a buck was trailing her. He was chasing her. And I was ready. She passed through an opening. I was ready in that opening with my rifle, with my 30-06, and I was waiting for him to come and get in the opening, and I was going to shoot him. It looked like a respectable 8-point. And as I was watching and waiting for him to step into my opening, your peripheral vision out of the corner of my eye, I caught this big son of a gun coming. And I mean, he dwarfed the first buck. You know what I mean? And I said, wow, I forgot about the first one. I said, well, I'm going to get that one. And when he stepped in my crosshairs, I shot him, and I hit him pretty good. I think I hit him kind of forward in the shoulder. He probably would have died. He probably would have expired. But I dropped my rifle, and I was watching him, and he got in like a lane quartering away from me, and I bolted, and I caught him again quartering away like in that back rib, and it ended up in his chest, and it dropped him in his tracks. And he was about 240 pounds. I mean, nice 8-point. I get choked up thinking about it because when I walked up on him, it was like, wow, you know. And about 135-inch buck, but just the massiveness of the animal. You know, 240-pound animal in the basin, you hardly ever see that. And I was so excited. My boat wasn't that far in the river, but I took off trying to drag him, you know, and bring him to my boat. I wanted to get him back to the camp, and I didn't drag him very far. I said, oh, no. I said, I know where I got a lot of help at the camp. I'm going to get some help. So I just went to my boat, and I went to the camp. I said, I need some help. The guys hadn't even finished eating lunch yet. It happened that fast. You know what I'm saying? I said, I killed a big buck. I said, and my sister had a video camera. She said, I'm going to come. We're going to video it. And my nephew came, and they came and they helped me drag him out. My sister actually videoed us dragging the buck out. We got to the camp, and all the hunters that hunted all morning running dog hadn't killed anything. You know what I mean? And I come back with this big, massive 8-point, and it's like I was the belle of the ball. You know what I'm saying? And my nephew Andy, when we walked up to the animal when he was down on the ground, he said, man, look at the neck on that deer. He said, it looks like one of them Nort deer, he said, you know. So from that experience, I said, man, you know, I said, that's the kind of animal I want to kill. You know, I want to hunt them like that. I want to get in their habitat. I don't want to push them with a dog. And I was kind of like the one who really kicked off the steel hunting. And eventually we ended up going into steel hunting, and I started scouting and started getting on some good animals, and we all did, you know. And from that point on, I started, you know, compiling quite a few nice, respectable deer. And there's a lot of differences. You know, it's a pressured animal. You know, it's not an animal like you see in some of these Midwestern states. You know, these big bucks are just roaming around like waiting for somebody to shoot them with a rifle, and then they're bow hunting them. You know what I mean? But you could kill them pretty much at any time with a rifle. Every one of these nice bucks that I've killed, when I saw them, I killed them. You know what I mean? I didn't get to see that animal, you know, on several different occasions, like, you know, outings in the woods, like see him and I didn't get him. See him, I didn't. When I saw this animal, I had to take advantage of a window of opportunity to get that shot on him. And I've taken some deer with my compound bow, and I've taken quite a few with my crossbow, and I enjoy hunting with the bow. But these animals, they look up to find you in that tree. You know what I'm saying? They can unbelievably, you know, you get down, you get upwind from them, they're gonna bust you with your scent. They're gonna smell you. They're gonna blow at you and let you know they know you're there. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna spot you in a tree. They know what those cypress trees and then the swamp looks like, because that's his bedding area. That's his home. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden you pop up in a tree where this animal's coming on a day-to-day basis, and he sees a big looking funny bump on that tree, and he's like, you know, I can tell a story of one that I didn't get in the area where I killed that nice big 9-point right there. That animal spotted me in that tree. I was 35 feet up in that tree, and he knew it was a group of 5 cypress trees. And I caught that when I went. I said, I'm gonna climb in one of those cypress right there, because I knew his bedding area was right in that area. And I put myself where I figured he was gonna come from. I sat on the rail of my tree and I faced the tree, so I was behind the trunk of the cypress tree. And I was ready with my rifle. I heard him coming in the water, and he hit a rub line that I had scouted, I had found, and he got on that rub line. It was about 9:30 in the morning. You know, I guess he was late chasing does or whatever, and he was coming into that swamp. He was going to his bed, which I was probably 30 yards from. And this animal was coming, and I just knew it was going to be a good buck, you know, so I was ready. I had my rifle ready, and I was waiting. And when he got about 30, 35 yards from him, he was in what we call some bois de marais. It's a little dead woods in the basin. They have these little ugly-looking, dead little branch-looking trees. And he kept slowing down. The closer he was getting to him, and he got to where he stopped. And I could see the bottom of his legs. You know what I mean? But I couldn't see his body to shoot him. He was in that those little thick, trashy trees. And he stopped. I said, that son of a gun sees me. And it wasn't long. I just never moved, man. I had my eyes squinting closed. You know what I mean? And I was just peeking at him on the side of that trunk of that cypress tree. And it wasn't long. It's like he was looking at that tree, and he said, I don't like that big bump on that tree. You know what I mean? And he turned around and he took off trotting straight back away from where he came. You know, he walked out of my life. Now, later on, I killed some good ones in that area. I don't know if it was him, but I didn't get him that morning.